right, welcome, ladies and gents, to a bonus episode of the Tangents podcast series called Panels on Pages. And I have a very, very special guest with me, Mark from Unshaven Comics. If you are a Chicago native and you've been to any convention in the last 10 years, you know about these guys. They've been around, they've been hustling, and The Samurnauts is finally out as a graphic novel, full trade paperback collection. And I just finished it the other day, so I wanted to talk about it. How you doing, Mark?
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely my pleasure. I was so excited to see that the book was in trade finally. I've been talking to you guys for years. I remember the first time I saw one of you, you were standing up. It was like, let me tell you about my comic book. And I took the pitch, and there was no trade. And that was literally, I think the first time I saw you guys was the first year I decided that I was going to stop collecting floppies. So I was like, nah, you know what? It's only going to be trades for me. So once you get a trade, that's when we'll talk. And then we saw each other over the years. I think we actually even featured you guys in our video last year. So I was super psyched to have this as a trade finally. How long?
Trust me, we were. Yes.
I was going to say, how long has this been? How long has the process been to get this out as a trade?
The Dreadnoughts out as a trade. It took us 6 years.
Wow. That's grinding though. That's grinding. It was all in house, right? You guys did obviously the writing and the art. Was the coloring and all that stuff done in house as well?
Yeah, I would say predominantly that way. I mean, obviously, I'm going to give shout outs where they are due. I did have some assistance from the most appropriately named delicious Tom Bacon, who helped me
Wow.
finish the book off. But beyond Tom, we also worked with Wes Wong, who's also a local Chicago guy, one of the best colorists in the business. And then a shout out to my main man over in Manila. Michael Angelo Arbon, and he's actually a Filipino guy who does most of my flatting now. And I only found him, let's just say, way too late in the process, but we are never not going to use him again. So he's a fantastic asset to us that definitely helped us, at this point, lurch dead across the finish line.
Excellent, excellent. Glad to hear that. Now, for those who don't know, Samurnauts is the tale of a, I don't want to call them superheroes, but they're an action team. They're guardians of a city. Listen, the way I see it, it's a very, very emotional love letter to Power Rangers, and
Absolutely is.
I think it's fantastic. I think it has all the, like, it hits all the key elements that Power Rangers kind of has brought up over the years, and like even some that only real diehards care about. Like only like diehards care about, like the flashback episodes to the like colonial era and the flashback episodes to the like cowboy era. And like I'm one of those guys. I sat through and I watched I think it was at the time 16 seasons back to back, and I loved every moment of it. So like to have something like this, super psyched. It was one of those things
Thanks.
that,
And I mean, really,
go ahead.
to say that I mean the genesis of this series was definitely our love letter. I'll say it was a love letter to other Power Ranger adjacent groups, like Ronin Warriors was actually one of our
Oh, I hadn't even touched on
heaviest
that yet.
influences to begin with.
You got to understand, Ronin Warriors is like the one series of anime that I watched that no one knows about. That no one is like, oh yeah, totally, Ronin Warriors, or even like Samurai Troopers. No one knows about that show. So for me, like, Kento of Hard Rock. That's I was so psyched when I saw the helmets right off the bat. Like second page in, I was like, this looks familiar.
We don't hide our love for that, and I mean, really, the Samurnauts itself got started partially as a joke. So in our before we did the Samurnaut stuff, we were, in our 20s, and we had to get all of the swearing and horror stuff out of our, you know, rot. So we were
Right.
doing this anthology series, and the very last page of our first book, we had blank, and I figured like, oh, we'll run across somebody who will buy an ad or something, and of course we weren't popular. No one was going to buy an ad. So at the last minute, uh, Matt, Kyle, and I, we were doing what we normally do, which was just wasting a lot of time and money at Baker Square. And I made a joke to them. I said, "Well, we need to make a fake ad, so let's come up with partially crass sounding, like, if Unshaven Comics sells out tomorrow, what is that obvious cash grab thing we're going to do?" And we just started riffing. And the whole idea is like, well, when Matt, Kyle, and I met, we met in sixth grade, and it was right when the Power Rangers came out, and we were sort of on that cusp where you watch the show for the first time, you're like, well, the giant robot stuff's cool, the rest of the show is kind of dorky, but the giant robot stuff's kind of cool.
Right.
And we sort of collective ennui about all of the mistakes that the villains made, and like how the show, it clearly didn't take itself seriously. So we're like,
Right.
well, one of these days. And so we started with that, and then one idea spits to the next, and we're like, okay, well, Zordon sucks. So how do we improve Zordon? We're like, well, you got a Splinter type guy, but instead of being like stuck in in limbo, maybe Splinter fights with them. And then of course, like Matt, it was probably Matt Rat, it's got to be a monkey because monkeys are way cooler.
Right.
And we're like, yep, done, sold. And then Kyle was like, he should be immortal. I was like, yes, keep it going.
Nice.
And like we just started spitballing, and the next thing we know, we said, well, they need something to fight. And we were thinking about all of the traditional villains. So obviously thinking more towards the 80s, we're like, well, if you run kind of like a Cobra thing, or some kind of big army. And I was like, now that doesn't feel right. Like, something more like the Decepticons, where it's got to be like one big guy and then a bunch of lieutenants, but not robots. And then somewhere we ended up with transforming demon dinosaurs from another dimension.
Oh, wow.
And so we threw all of that together. We made a fake ad, and at the bottom of the ad, we put "coming the summer of 2020." Wink to our fans, like, no, we're hardcore and we're going to do all of these rated R, turn your expectations upside down stories. And what ends up happening is we do one horror book, we do one rated R, and then it's time for the third book. And right around the time we're coming up with what to do, knew we were going to be fathers. And we're having another one of those spitball sessions, and I'm staring at the back of that ad. And the problem we'd run into is the first book was written by Kyle. The second book was written by me, and I had not yet done interior work. And I was talking about doing the third book. And Matt was like, well, I want to write a story. And I was like, we have to balance this. He looked at me, and again, Matt's a much bigger, angrier guy than I am. So he just do split the art, man. Let's just do that. And I was like, okay. So we were sitting around like, well, how do we make one story that splits an artist's duty? And that's when, it just hit me. I'm like, well, we did that Samurnot's fake ad. I'm like, he's an immortal kung fu monkey. If I did future, because all my were clean, and if you, Matt, did all of the flashbacks because he's analog, he does a lot of paint stuff, I was like, that might work. And basically at that point, as we've long said to one another in a not so joking way, we're like, writes, it's one idea, and next thing we know, we're like, well, this is much easier for me to write and draw my half, and then Kyle and Matt's flashbacks, and try to tie it together. And we did that first book, and the audience loved it so much that we came back after we had transforming demon dinosaurs. Maybe we should take the idea seriously. Somebody started throwing out, like, this is right when The Walking Dead was coming out, and we're like, well, zombies are kind of the thing, but none of us wanted to do brain-eating zombies.
Sure.
Matt loves voodoo zombies, so he's like, well, we should do zombies. And I was like, that's not enough. Like, you got to start stacking. What else can we do? And then Kyle's like, well, no one's doing pirates. We're like, okay, so zombie pirates? I'm like, well, that's Pirates of the Caribbean. That's been done. And then we're like, yeah, but what if they're cyber or space pirates? Now it writes
Days back.
itself.
Yep.
Put that all together. We in 2011 we decided this Curse of the Dreadnought series. Like I said, it took the better part of 6 years of production for us to get through it because each issue longer because Matt and I would lose page count, or we would be in the middle of something or something that we wanted to do, and we're like, well, anybody, like, if the first issue was 24 pages, we're like, let's do 36 because that gives Matt and I each 18 pages to kind of fudge around. And
Right.
then we started coming up with ways for Matt and I to combine our artwork, and we're like, okay, there was like a nightmare sequence, so we did that, and then we got to the fourth book, and Matt and I are sitting at the planning stage, and I was like, this whole thing in a giant robot battle, I'm like, we gotta let people enjoy that. That's gotta breathe. So last thing we found out is the fourth book in the series, instead of being 36 pages, ended up being 52.
Jeez.
So that's sort of what kind
I
of
thought
tripped
it
us
was
up,
like a
is trying to
weird.
finish.
It felt when I was reading it, it felt like a weird page count.
It feels thicker. We after we finished that fourth book, it came out at Dragon Con last year, and at that point it was just basically shine the bat signal in the sky, call every favor from every friend we had, and said, let's make this a trade. And then Matt and Kyle went away, and they just let me toil in the dungeon until it was done.
Well, I think it's a fantastic book. Just the random turns. Like I said, I think there's a little bit of everything. I think there's just all these really cool callbacks to concepts from, like you said, Ronin Warriors, which that blew me away. Like I said, the flashback sequence, the helmets in the present, I was like, whatever. And then what actually did it for me is when, like, this scene right here. I don't know if you're watching it right now, but the scene where
Oh yeah,
where, and I don't know the names yet. Was it Rafe?
Rafe's the blue.
Yeah. When Rafe cuts the pirate at the beginning, I'm like, I've seen that weapon before. And then, like, it all kind of just came together for me when it flashed back to the like feudal Japan, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's the freaking Ronin Warriors. I'm like, I love that because that, like I said, that's one of my favorite animes of all time. So, like, just and the art, by the way, is really really cool. I love the like clear difference between time periods, but you can even see, like, in moments like this where you have, like you said, your more cleaner style for the future, but then we close up here to show the Dreadnoughts logo, and then it cuts back to kind of more of a more painted style. But even then, that close up becomes more detailed, more painterly. So then it kind of has that flashback kind of transition like you would in a movie or a TV show. Just
Yeah, and that's definitely what we were going for. Is, I mean, the whole concept, the Samurnaut Genesis issue, it in and of itself was meant to be tongue in cheek. Our framing device in that series, called the White, you basically were following sort of like a Rod Serling character through a Twilight Zone, but instead of being like a buttoned up white dude, this is just like kind of a stoner slacker type character who is pretty sure he's just tripping, but we're not sure about that. So the whole idea is that he remembers the Samurnauts as a TV show, and he just, instead of actually going into like a Twilight Zone parallel dimension story, he basically just casts his magic to build himself a TV and couch, and just watches the quote lost episode of the Samurnauts. So we definitely built the series kind of around our love of those series, especially like Ronin Warriors and the Power Rangers. Obviously, we hear a lot from the people that go, oh, this is just the Monkey King, and every now and again they'll go, oh, what about that Super Hyper Monkey Force Go? And we're like, yeah, well, there's a monkey in this, but it has nothing to do with that. But
I remember that. I actually, like, I haven't thought about that in years.
all about the deep cuts. And then, like, I know for me personally, I have a huge love for Exo Force, or I'm sorry, Exo Squad,
Yes.
which
Oh my god, you are speaking my language.
one part of this book that we have not yet explored, but trust me, there's plenty more to come, and I'm sure we're going to do some kind of E-frame esque uh, device as soon as I can figure out a way to appropriate that tech myself and figure out a way to draw it. We
That's
get
one of my
close, like
favorite moments in the book, by the way, is when Sora quits, which is like another classic moment for any team-based book where you have a character who's distrustful of the leader. I love it's like, it's like a cliche moment, but it's done in such a way where it's like, I quit, by the way, I'm still gonna go do this thing we were gonna do anyway. Like,
yeah, I mean, I enjoy, yeah, definitely the trope of the he's our hooker with the heart of gold, and he's got reasons which honestly aren't unfound at the time. The whole
right.
impetus of that first issue is that this one dreadnought scout basically pants the entire squad,
Yep.
and in his mind, Master Al, of all the things he's taught them, he never taught them or told them about this enemy that they never faced, and he recalls vaguely being told by his father not to trust the monkey. What does that mean? So yeah, he plays the hooker, the Raphael, and he quits. And of course, on his way out, he steals the production Sammer cycle, um, which of course, like, there was no way we were going to like have a scene of him being all introspective. So like I tried to wrap that into the framing of that second issue, and then like almost immediately he's attacked, so we have to jump into transforming sequences, and trust me, that still stands out as one of my favorite like cold opens to do, is like take a Samurnaut, take him out of his armor, put him into new armor, which is even cooler, which of course led us like mid, like, what would be cool, can we just give him completely new suits? And we ended up changing the Samurnaut costume by the end of issue 3.
I really like that approach, and it again, it calls back to a lot of really cool things that I loved about various Power Ranger seasons, but like what are they always called, battleizers. Whenever somebody got a battleizer of some sort, everyone got ridiculous armor, and I'm just like, why was this not out like day one? Let's just mop the floor with the bad guys right off the bat. Maybe they'll leave just by show of force. Like, I always thought, that was like, can we just use the cool stuff now? And that's why I like the powers on the armor. Welcome, VIP King. How you doing? The powers on the armor are super super cool. Like the Green Lantern esque hands to fight with. Fantastic.
Yeah, and that's obviously that's my love. My favorite superhero clearly is Green Lantern, and I absolutely had to have some kind of fun scene where I could take advantage of that. So I especially, basically, if you're your own writer in this case, I can just write myself what I want to do. So that was especially one of those moments where I was like, I need giant construct hands.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. I love a. I love that the story completes itself. It's one complete arc. Something that a lot of, I don't want to say a lot. I would say there are notable numbers of indie creators that will put out a trade of their first 4 issues or whatever, and somehow that's not a complete arc. And then I'm sitting there with like with a face on my face, like, like, now you're just trying to get money out of me, because I would have liked to have the whole story and not be at to be continued. But
Sure. And I mean, and obviously we know, like, there's no way, if we were putting out books with, let's say, better regularity, maybe we would have expanded or let things go in that manner. But we know our strengths and weaknesses, and we definitely said with this concept, with Curse, it was a 4-issue miniseries that we felt like we could put together a solid story. And this one definitely, I mean, it's, when you put the trade together, it's 200 pages, so there's plenty of
yeah,
content there.
it's a hefty one. It's, look at that. Bam.
And we know the next 3 Samurnaut stories, which we're all working on at the same time, each one of those installments will be a one and done, and they'll be about 72 pages.
Oh, like
We're,
single
we're trying to
issues.
keep. Typically, we're going to do. I call it prestige format. DC used to release these things sort of like 80-page giants, but they had sort of a nicer, thicker, like almost a trade quality cover
Sure, sure, sure.
stock.
No, I understand PF. Actually, to the book I On Wednesdays I do my comic book show in the mornings usually. So like I did prestige format book Etheric Mechanics by Warren Ellis. Great read, by the way, if you want to have a fun read. But no, I completely understand. I like those books because that to me it kind of bridges that gap. Like this to me is not a floppy; it's shelvable. There's just more options to it as far as, and it gives you a little bit nicer of an experience for sure. But yeah, if it's a one and done, that's gonna be fantastic.
And that's because that's the impetus coming out of this. And again, I mean, I have no qualms about being spoilerific about this. I mean, suffice to say that we create a lot of world building in this trade, and
Yes.
we are we're triggering our inner Robert Kirkman when we say, "Hey, is there some foothold that we can now spark off of?" And we said, "Well, yeah. The fact is, like one of the big secrets to this book, and I won't get into the actual secret part of it, but basically, the Samurnauts of the 1850s lose the purple Samurnaut for reasons undisclosed. And with him gone, there is no getting him back. And the way we sort of explain that is say, like, now, Master Al, the immortal Kung Fu monkey, what happened after that? Did he decide to train more teams? In his mind, he just lost a chunk of this mysterious energy that powers the Samurnauts to begin with.
Right.
And while he could manifest more, Master, having led and by this point, let's just be honest, buried many teams over the course of many, many
Right.
years, he essentially, after that team disbands, decides that he's not going to train any permanent teams anymore. And he sort of enters the Kane Kung Fu walk the earth mentality. And he's basically just going to go out into the world.
Spec
And
Ops.
when the evil of the world demands the Samurnauts return, he deputizes a pop up team. They solve the problem. He then takes the power back and he moves on to the next adventure and the next time. So,
I like that. I like that a lot.
running through. So,
It reminds me of the I think it was called Secret Defenders for Marvel in the '90s, where Doctor Strange was kind of like some stuff's going on. I need XYZ people. Let's go. 2-3 issues. All right, thanks guys. See you next time.
totally, it's riffing on stuff like that. In our case, the next three books, the first one, which Kyle's working on, doesn't follow that timeline per se. It actually plugs in as our second ever team of Samurnauts that fight what we would consider to be sort of the biggest bad of the groups. Like in our minds, the Dreadnoughts are awesome, but they are basically a satellite villain. The main villain are those transforming demon dinosaurs, and
Okay.
which we're titling the Rage of Rep Simeon. Essentially, the Onisaurus clan, those interdimensional transforming demon dinosaurs,
Okay.
use their evil science to marry their dino DNA with a rabid monkey that we met, that you actually meet inside the Samurnauts Genesis, which is the secret origin. Basically, mutate him into a simian lizard hybrid creature, and it's going to be him against the second ever Samurnauts team. So that'll be one story, and then Matt is going to be handling a 1920s Mexico City based Luchonauts story.
Yes, that's amazing.
Be tackling the all-girl Samurnaut squad of the 1980s in a book we're entitling Samurnauts to the Max.
I like it. I like that. That's
And in that book,
very period appropriate.
it's my love letter to Glow, basically, and I'm going to have them face a communist hive mind femme fatale squad.
Nice.
Fun.
I like
And
everything about that.
that'll be the next three things that we're working. Basically, we're holding each other accountable, and in essence, creating a contest that Kyle will win because we actually have to pay an outside artist for the first time to work. But in that case, it makes sense. Matt's got his story, I've got mine. Kyle has written The Rage of Rep Simeon, and we obviously would like to have all three of these stories sort of come out, depending largely on how fast or slow Matt and I work. We'll choose what to do. I think we personally enjoy doing the trade now that we've had a couple of cons with the trade instead of just the floppies,
Hmm.
and I know selling it exactly like you wanted to buy it. I'd rather have sell it to somebody who wants one and done, because trust me, it's one of those things. You triggered in me many memories of you running past us at every con, every C2E2, and you just walk by, trade? Nope, okay. And we're like, yep, there, and you weren't alone. So we know that the way to go for us, and part of our evil machinations with this as a brand is just to be able to show like stories, so many different genres that you can bounce between with this team action setup. And so long as you have that through line with the monkey, you've got something fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the concept. Could be like Samronauts Archives or something like that. I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas. I'll take a quarter% publishing on that. No, but that would be like I would love like, and that's the kind of thing where it's you have your established universe with this book, and then if I put another book next to it, even though it's kind of takes place in between certain chapters and certain pages of this, it still kind of builds out that universe and makes that whole complete story. I mean, some of the best, if we go to like mainstream, some of the best X-Men stories are stories that are told of stuff that happened between other things and behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff. So no, I really really like that concept. And even if you have you have the big book, and then you say if you like the 80s, here's the 80s book in nice shelvable prestige format as well. You give
Mhm,
people that
mhm.
option.
Yeah, and that's sort of what we ultimately envision represent, is that obviously we hope that we gain a core group of fans that will buy anything that has Samurnauts on it because they know that it's going to be a great team action adventure of a particular period in time. But if not, like that's definitely something. So somebody looking, excuse me, for something that is absolutely unrelated to Cape and Cowl superheroics might
Sure.
really be enticed by a luchador story. Or for those people that are definitely fans of more of like a Samurai Jack, they might enjoy the Rage of Rep Simeon. And then for mine, clearly like the throwback vibe, the hipster vibe, and then especially for us, like we do have some great fans who are run the gamut of all different ages, all gender. But especially, I love to have a book where we can say, "Hey, look, rather than just throw a bone and try to balance a team out between men and women, black and white, whatever. Here's a whole group of badass women that are going to go out there and they're going to be deputized by Master Al, and they're going to do some really cool stuff, and they're going to face all female villains. So it is sort of a wink and a nudge at like the Sailor Moon type stuff, but it's going to be decidedly no cheesecake, just really good action adventure. Where I get to lean into all of my favorite 80s tropes. I literally have a bulleted list of
Nice.
things that need to happen in the book. So
Nice.
I'm not kidding when I tell you Master Al will totally be driving a badass, like A team style van.
Yes. Yes, I like it. And that's the other cool thing is you have the and what one of the biggest things that I like about this is that all of their weaponry is it's not driven by their quote unquote morphing grid. It's it's driven by the technology and the innovation of one of the members. So like everything is made by them, and that like there was one season of Power Rangers where it was like technically Turbo, all the Turbo stuff was built by the Rangers, which I always thought was the coolest thing.
And I say we know that Master Al basically has built the weapons himself because he infuses some of that Samur Force energy or what have you
Right.
into those things. But the weapons themselves usually serve the greater good of the actual Samurnaut using it. So we know like purple and green Samurnauts typically are your more close up fighters. So you'll never see like a purple Samurnaut with like a bow and arrow. You're
Right.
definitely going to see them with hammer fists or bucklers on their gauntlets or something like that. And then we try to stick hopefully towards like similar style of weapon. And actually one thing I want to sort of explore, I think, for Samurnauts to the Max is I remember that first season Power Rangers where they had their big plastic weapons, but they also carried a sidearm,
Yes.
and
Slash
people tend to
dagger
forget that
slash
part.
random dagger, converting
Right.
sidearm to dagger.
And I like that idea, so I might figure out a way to because again the thing is like if
Like
you're
a
going to
legacy weapon.
deputize,
Like a legacy weapon that they all get. Right?
especially like if he's imbuing people with the Samurnaut energy, um especially if it's a pop-up team, um obviously let's say that you are a great fighter and you're getting this influx of energy,
Right.
you're going to be an even better fighter. But what if he's deputized you because you have the right heart but you've never thrown a punch in your life?
Right.
Well, we got to figure out something to do for them. And luckily, I have a slight obsession slash problem with Nerf guns. So we typically use those as reference points to try to create stuff. So I'm probably going to be debuting some kind of cable-esque gun because I definitely have one of the characters, one of the Samurnauts of the 1980s. She is sort of like a pop star, like Gem,
Nice.
but there's like no combat training whatsoever.
Right.
So it's just sort of like, hey, you know, you inspire people, you cause that, and that is worthy of being deputized as a Samurnaut. And you know, as something is attacking her, she's like, what do I do? And then you know, next thing you know, smash cut, she's got some kind of giant 14 barreled bazooka thing. Um, fun to draw. So
Nice. Fantastic. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. Thank you so much for jumping on, and giving us some insight into the future of the Samurnauts, and talking about the book. By the way, anyone watching, anyone listening or watching in the future, make sure you guys check out Unshaven Comics Samurnauts. Is it just unshavencomics.com?
it is now. So if you guys just go to unshavencomics.com,
There you go.
or you could even join us on our Facebook group, which is just facebook.com/unshavencomics. We usually post a couple times a day. We usually have some pretty funny questions, and especially on Saturdays when we do unpopular opinion Saturdays, which are just amazing times to get into nerd rage fights, which we love to stoke the fires on.
For sure, for sure. All right, well, Mark, thank you again for hanging out. Thank you, VIP King, for watching. And anyone listening or watching in the future, make sure you guys check out the links in the description below. Everything is going to be linked so you guys can have quick access to it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.